My grandfather, Walter West, was a constant presence in my childhood. My mother and I lived in his house until I was almost 4, and I visited it most weekends until I left home at 18. Although he never spoke of his military activities, I was aware that he had served in the Great War. In fact, he was a fortunate but typical member of his generation, an early volunteer, shaped by war, peace, and war again. Britain entered the war in August 1914 when the advancing German armies invaded neutral Belgium in order to advance through northern France to capture Paris. On declaration of war, most of the British regular army was dispatched to assist the French and Belgians in stopping the advance. By late 1914 they had succeeded, but at enormous cost: the destruction of the pre-war British Army at the Battle of Mons. The patriotic fervour generated by reports of the fighting and by massive recruiting efforts, Kitchener's "Your Country Needs You," created a huge army of volunteers throughout the country. My grandfather was one of the earliest. He joined the Leicestershire Yeomanry, the territorial regiment of the Leicester Tigers, and was sent to the Ypres salient in what remained of Belgium, where the Western Front had ground to a deadlocked standstill. He and they remained there for 4 years, during which well over 1 million casualties were sustained. Before the war, Ypres was a little-regarded medieval border town, with easy access to the Channel ports to the west and protected by an arc of low hills to the north, east and south. The German advance overran it, but it was recaptured during the First Battle of Ypres, after which the front line was along the hills. It had sustained massive destruction and was too close to enemy lines to support headquarter operations. Instead, they were established a few miles west, at Poperinghe. For more than 4 years, Pop was the centre of British and Empire activities. It was the behind-the-lines support, supply, transfer and hospital station of the Ypres salient. It is said that there were more miles of railway track between Poperinghe and the coastal ports than in the whole of England. Troops, including my grandfather, were billeted around the town before being sent forward, while on rest and recreation, in need of medical care, or en route home for leave or medical demobilisation. Recreational activity was supplied by many reputable and disreputable sources. Support centres were set up by the Red Cross, the YMCA, and by various religious organisations. One was unique: Talbot House, known then and afterwards by its telegraphic abbreviation Toc H, and by the unique sign and lamp outside its door. Its uniqueness was that by dictate of its leader, the Reverend P.B. Clayton, it was a non-denominational Christian house where all ranks disappeared at the door, and officers sat at the same tables as privates, my grandfather among them. Indoor and outdoor games, activities, and quiet reflection were provided and organised by the charismatic Tubby Clayton along the lines of a youth club. At the age of 67, I finally visited Talbot House in Poperinghe. Although it was nearly lost after the war, it was subsequently restored and is now a shrine of remembrance, receiving many visitors with family connections. I had the honour of entering my grandfather's name in the register in which they are trying to record all known wartime users. I am not a superstitious man, neither do I believe in ghosts and spirits. But on entering this building, especially the upper room used as chapel and place of peace, is an overwhelming experience. It takes little imagination to feel the weight of thousands of personal histories in that place. Although non-denominational, hundreds of men were confirmed in the upper room before being sent forward to the trenches, many within days or hours of their deaths. After the war, Toc H became an international Christian youth movement. Started in London by Tubby Clayton with the support and encouragement of the then Queen Elizabeth, afterwards Queen Mother. My grandfather did talk about his time in Toc H while billeted in the rear. He evidently valued the experience, because on his return home he was one of the founders of the local Toc H branch, something repeated all over the British Empire. We believe that my grandfather served on the Ypres salient for the entire war, except for a 12-week period when he returned to Oxford and Aldershot for officer training, having been given a field commission as second lieutenant. He never spoke of his time in the trenches, only that at St John's College. He evidently escaped serious injury, though in 1916 he contracted appendicitis. His operational scar was all the way from his ribcage to his pubic bone, and the survival rate for abdominal surgery in field hospitals was less than 15%. He married in early 1918, presumably while on officer training leave, since my mother was born in January 1919. On return home, he resumed his trade as a painter and decorator, and his role as a volunteer fireman. Like many of his comrades, he was, for the rest of his life, a clubbable man, entering few of the more than 30 pubs in the town, but being a member of most of the clubs. As a footnote, he served in the Second World War as a retained fireman. He attended a major fire at Frank Whittle's Power Jets factory at Lutterworth, where an explosion blew out his left eardrum, his only injury in the two wars. He died in 1982, just a few days short of his 89th birthday. Just an ordinary working-class man of the 20th century, but one of the many unsung heroes.